Colin, how's it going?
What's going on, man?
So, Colin, you're a load planner here at Aborn. You started when?
Back in March.
Back in March. Awesome. And that's 2019. So
Yeah. So it's been about 9 months now.
yeah, that's awesome. So supply chain under 30, as you kind of know, we're here talking sort of to supply chain professionals who are under the age of 30 and trying to talk about how they got here, what their journey's been like, and then sort of if you were talking to kind of a peer, what they should know about the supply chain, especially the college kids coming up and into the system. So
Yeah. No,
super
ready
fun,
to roll.
super. So let's start it out, man. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Education, all that fun stuff.
Born and raised in South Shore, Massachusetts, in Marshfield, about a couple towns over from where we are now.
Really went far.
Yeah, really roamed far, but and then I'm living in Weymouth, which is just a couple towns north, really straying the path on everything. But so I been around, especially with the supply chain industry. It's kind of got an early introduction into it right after high school. I got a job working at a contact lens distributor. And so it was kind of like, it was just kind of like a paying job, like an hourly job, something to kind of pay the bills. I wasn't going to school at the time or anything like that. So after a couple of years of doing that, I kind of got to a point where I was like, all right, well, I obviously should probably start looking for a college degree or some sort of pursuit of education. Right. So then I started going to community college and everything like that. And then when it came down to kind of choosing what I wanted to do, I kind of was like, all right, well, I have some experience in the supply chain industry, working in a dock and, working in a distribution center and everything like that. And then, So when it came to the opportunity of actually choosing my major and choosing what I specifically wanted to go for, I jumped on that. I kind of had it in my mind, all in all, supply chain, everybody needs products. Everybody needs something moved somewhere or another. It's not like it's not like the newspaper industry where it's going to get replaced by the internet and everything like that. So it's kind of like, even though it might go through its ebbs and flows, it's kind of an industry that's there to stay. And I guess I kind of was looking for that sense of security into it. So obviously, going after kind of getting some education, I was lucky enough to go down to Clemson, which is an old rival to whatever that thing is on your shirt.
Listen. The two of us have to handle like the ACC. No one else is going to do it. But the Coastal's going to try to be good in the ACC. Get out of here.
Hey, Virginia Tech's got like another couple of good years.
They're there. Fuentes is taking it to the lead.
Yeah.
So you went to Clemson.
Yeah. So I went down to Clemson. Obviously, I really enjoyed my experience down there. Really, obviously the education was, in my opinion, second to none. But coming back up, and once I was kind of leaving, I had the opportunity to work in a couple different areas of supply chain. I worked in the sourcing element, and then I, like I said before, working in the distribution side.
Right.
And then when it came to the actual logistics form, like entering the world of logistics, I had an opportunity there to work for a 3PL. Some great exposure, just kind of the day-to-day, and also just on introduction into just all these different companies and the way that they all operate, and kind of the nuances that go in between them all. And
did you know what a 3PL was before that, given like all your experience, or was that kind of like a
you have your education background where it's a third party logistics company. You're like, okay, I get it. There's kind of like a middleman maybe there, but you really don't quite understand really until you dive in. You can try to look up as much as you can, but really it's getting the experiences, trial by fire, per se.
Because it's all words. Like, at least that was kind of like my experience when I kind of first started, was like, try to read, try to do some education, but like until you kind of like see people, like you kind of had to see like how the dots connected, almost in a sense, right?
Exactly. It's just literally you learn by doing.
Right.
You can explain it to me all you want, but it's like, if it's something that the way it's really going to resonate is really by taking the action and actually getting involved and taking the steps that are that we deal with every day.
Yeah. So let's take a couple steps back, because you kind of gave a great kind of story, but I think there's definitely parts in between that I kind of want to ask some questions. So let's start off with the first thing. Like, what was schooling like for you kind of starting out? Like, what was like in high school? Like, were you into math and sciences? Were you kind of like, damn, let me get out of here, I hate this freaking thing? Like, How did it all work out?
Yeah,
for
I
you?
guess you could say it was more of the latter. Jumped around kind of a little bit, and it was just, never really took school that seriously and everything. Knowing that, in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm smart enough to be one of those savants going right out of high school, and all of a sudden, starting up a company and doing well for myself. But obviously, was not in that category. So
you were thinking more of like entrepreneurship when you were getting out of school, like kind of.
I mean,
I got some
whether or
good
not it
ideas
was
there.
kind of like jumping into a trade and then maybe getting, work experience and then owning a company, or maybe
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, or maybe just kind of seeing what falls in my lap, seeing what kind of creative outlets I could do with it. But I mean, obviously none of those things really came to fruition. And I luckily was able to fall back on an education.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of, it's a cool story, to the idea that like you didn't just immediately get out there, you actually got work experience. You get to kind of learn something so you could have a little more focused education. Like I laugh all the time about how stupid my freaking degree at Florida State was. I'm like, my classes were dumb. I loved the football, I loved the sports, I loved the partying, but I'm like, I got nothing out of there. It was like I got out of that job, and I'm like, what the hell do I do now? And kind of just slowly did that. But like, so how was that job, the one that you got at the Lens Contacts? Like, what was that like? Was it just a job, or were you kind of starting to see bigger picture when you took that on?
Well, you started to, just kind of as you're kind of getting introduced to more parts of it. Like, I mean, I was working in kind of just a packing area where you're just literally packaging boxes and, sending them out and figuring out which couriers they're going with. And then you kind of go to the picking stage where you're basically going all around the warehouse. You kind of got to learn where things are. You kind of got to learn where things are mapped out, how things are done. And then you kind of have other experiences to like creating the mapping for other people.
Right.
And basically you have like a whole array of trays and different orders. And then you basically be like, all right, well, this is, what I expect kind of be the smoothest route for all these to be shipping together, or for all these to be bunched together, for them to be go out into the pick in the warehouse. And it's just kind of the more exposure that I got to it, you realize the different levels of it.
Right. Because you start with just packing, and then you're like, okay, what about the carriers? And then you're starting to see more and more. Like, was that interesting to you, or was it sort of just like, hey, it's a job, I'm high school, I'm just here for like the money real quick? Or like, what was?
I mean, obviously started like that, but over time, especially when I figured out that I actually kind of needed to take the jump into getting the education, you kind of start keeping your ears out, your eyes out, like for, maybe just different things that might interest you, or maybe different things that you're just looking to notice along the way.
Right. It's essentially you were doing like an internship that you weren't even aware of. You're actually at least getting paid the whole time. So like, so doing an internship where you're like, oh man, this sucks. Like, what am I doing this for? You're like, I get to get a little more exposure to what I actually like. So what were you able to kind of identify that stuff at that point in time? Or is this sort of like a Monday morning quarterback? You kind of can look back and be like, oh, the lens crafter. I was like, not lens crafter. The contact lenses, you're able to start seeing like, this was interesting to me, this section of it I hated. Or was that kind of just like, it was the blur, you just kind of slowly, organically kind of came to, man, I need to get education. I don't know, that thing was what I was doing makes this sense.
I think that like, you have different opportunities there in front of yourself, and you realize that they're kind of, other people are kind of getting the first look, or maybe other people are kind of getting the, hard work will obviously, put you ahead in a lot of ways. But then there's some aspects of being like, from a managerial standpoint, that they, one of their requirements was a bachelor's degree. Immediately having a door closed right there.
Right.
Knowing that I'm fully capable of, being able to pursue something like that, but having the door closed on me over something, that was really the kind of first introduction to being like, all right, I know I need to kind of start getting it together, especially when, I'm realizing that I have, more free time on your hands, the Monday through Friday, the 9 to 5 per se.
So what was that like when you kind of went into education after being in the work field? Like, it's something that, like, again, I kind of like sat there and I think like, man, I wish I would have done that. But so what was that experience like? Is it something where you're like a little more focused, a little more, you have direction compared to like your fellow students who kind of are just like, I don't know, like I'm just here because I graduated.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a part of that. You kind of got the kick in the ass that you need to kind of really know what you need to get done. But then there's also kind of going back what you're saying on your degree, you like just going around staring at different girls around the partying and everything like that. So
you're kind of the best of both worlds. You actually weren't like this blind fool that's just like, I don't know, after I get out, this is going to be a wonderful world I'm entering. And you're just like, I get where I'm going. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, that was the thing. It's just like, especially like towards the end of it, you got all these people with these different lofty goals of where they want to be, and, maybe not quite hitting those. And I'm
You're
kind of
Kermit
sitting
the
there
Frog
being
with your
like,
tea.
yeah,
None of my
exactly.
business. You're just
Yeah.
sitting there drinking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, tea. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. Talk to me about Clemson. What was that like? So what was the degree you got? Because you did the community college, you got the AA, and then
Yeah, so I actually didn't even finish out with my associates because of the transfer requirements. I was lucky enough to kind of their transfer requirements were pretty unique, especially being an out of state student, and then also kind of having somebody that I knew from faculty, like a family member or a family friend that was like on faculty that just kind of like put me in front of somebody that said reach out to this person.
at Clemson.
At Clemson,
Oh
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So it was basically got into a situation where it was just after so many credits, I was able to kind of use those grades to be able to transfer over, and then just got somebody that I was able to reach out to, kind of just did a visit down, knock on the door saying, hey, come take a look at my file. And luckily they did, and it looked good enough for them.
What did you apply? Like, what was the major? What were you declaring for?
It was business management was really just kind of the introductory of what I wanted to go into. But then kind of as I was exploring it more, I kept on, using my experiences or just using my work experience, just jump back on the contact lens distributor, which just kind of pushed me into sticking with supply chain.
Okay. So that was you applied business, but you kind of with that focus on supply chain.
Yeah. So it ended up bringing the focus onto there because, obviously it's like under the business umbrella.
Yeah. So what was Clemson like?
It was great, man.
I mean, I know ACC, so I guess like for the audience, talk to me a little bit. Like,
it's fun, man. It's you got this little old town in upstate South Carolina. Especially for a Boston kid, you got these funny. There's a lot of different associations. Like I had family that lived in the area that had moved down just like a few years before, just because they liked it. The Red Sox got an affiliate in Greenville, which is a half hour away.
Right.
You're only you're 4 hours away from the beach or whatever, but it's, you got the lake all around, and it's just really kind of this cool niche, small town, big school community.
Yeah.
And it was, the closest thing I could compare it to is UMass Amherst.
Right.
I did friends that went out there. I'd go out and visit them, and I loved that environment. So,
but it's like a different world too. Like, especially when you go to those big colleges, like in a big college in a Power 5, where like things that happen at your college are like national news. Like something that happens at UMass up here really isn't a huge thing. Like sports wise, what are they paying attention to? But like Clemson, because you were there during the whole national championship seasons, right?
Yeah. And I mean, just even going into these past few years, I'm getting myself, when we had Trevor Lawrence first coming in, when he got announced as like, it was either like a late junior or early senior or something like that.
Yeah.
He came on campus and did some visit, and I was around just visiting, and I'm getting giddy over seeing this high school kid who I'm never going to meet, never going to have any association. Yeah.
It was like, I was on the bus at Florida State, and like EJ Manuel's on the bus, and like everyone's kind of quiet, but at the same time, like you get so used to seeing D1 athletes that you don't really react as much, but it's always that thing of like, oh my God, that's EJ Manuel. And this was before we knew that Xavier Manuel wasn't going to be an HCC commentator that really did nothing in the real world. That was I was during the Jeff Bowden era, so I was very excited about an actual like quarterback. All of a sudden, we don't got Drew the Boo Weatherford or damn Xavier Lee, the X Factor that couldn't freaking do anything. Don't worry, I'm just aging myself a little bit more to you, huh?
Yeah, no,
Cool.
definitely. Going a little bit over.
I was at Florida State when we sucked. And it could be right now, thankfully. So what classes wise, like how was that? So you had real world experience, and then you're attending a major university that prides itself on the whole idea of like, I attended here, I got that on my resume. What were classes like? How was that kind of experience?
I mean, they were pretty much what you would expect out of a college class. I mean, it was in a sense pretty liberal. You had your teachers that were, strict and very by the book, and you had your requirements on, the attendance requirements, very strict on that. You had the clickers to make sure you were there and everything, and answering questions throughout. And then you had the ones that were a little more lax and kind of gave you the autonomy to be able to kind of do the workload as you want to do it. And I mean, it was pretty balanced overall. I mean, it was kind of what I would expect out of a college experience, out of somebody that didn't have.
Right. Was it how much technology was kind of there when you were going? Like, was it smart boards, stuff like that? Most
it
of your
was
things were online.
starting to integrate a lot of that, you know, a lot of different things. There was like, you know, laptops in the classroom type thing. And then, you know, but like I said, too, there was also the few classes like an economics class where, you know, you had to be at every single one of the classes. Couldn't have cell phones, had take your cell phones type thing, you know. Ugh. Like get yelled at for the most minor little things. And but then there was also the teachers that wanted to integrate technology into everything that they were doing.
What about technology kind of in the real world? Because you kind of came from that experience. So, like, did you get to do like the stuff? Because you knew what it was kind of more like in the actual field. Now I get that the degree is kind of getting you ready for more management, kind of different types of thinking. But like, were they bringing in the college experience the same type of technology you were using out in the world when you were doing the real work in the real supply chain, or was it a lot of like theoretical, this is what you could experience type of stuff?
Well, there was a lot of, I guess you could say on theoretical stuff being like, these are things that are being introduced into the industry,
right, that
are improving it. And that, you know, could be the forefront of big changes that are coming. But, you know,
you're back in class going, bullshit.
Exactly. Well, not even that, but it kind of goes back to like what we were talking about before, you know, you just, the learning by doing. Thing.
Right,
you know,
right.
That's all words up until a point, you know. Then once you start to get into the environment, once you start to see it around you, it all starts to make a little bit more sense, and you can understand like where really the advantages and disadvantages are between different like just different versions of technology or different offerings that they have out there.
What was something you think that it didn't prepare you for when it came to coming into the supply chain? Like, were there things you're like, man, why don't we talk about this thing? Like, why wasn't this sort of like a conversation topic? Because this comes up a hell of a ton as like a load planner, or when I was with 3PL, like all these different roles I've had. And like, this is a common theme that we weren't really talking about. Was there something like that? Or,
I mean, somewhat like we had a different aspect kind of like teaching us, lean operations was a big thing that stuck with me, right. Which is basically, you know, every process that you have can be improved. No matter what you do, anything in this world, it can be improved in one way or another. And all starts out with just identifying the weak point and then improving that.
Right.
And, you know, whether it's a major or minor change or minor improvement, you know, it's still a step up. And you kind of always kind of have that kind of focus on your head, or like kind of have that in the back of your mind, whatever you're doing, just knowing that, especially what's big on what we do here is a lot of the automation and everything like that.
Right.
We really kind of take a step into that and really try to identify just the little points and just try to smooth it out on a larger scale.
That's awesome. So what happened? You graduate, and then what's the job force look like? Were you kind of being poached? Were you being recruited? Or was it kind of 500 resumes going out to kind of anywhere in the New England? Like, what was kind of your mindset?
Well, the thing was, I like initially when I graduated, there were some different things personally going on. You know, my dad wasn't really doing too well at the time. So It's like, I was working, I liked where I was, but then I knew I kind of had to go home.
Right.
And then kind of when I went to go home, it didn't really give myself the kick I needed to like jump into the job force. But, you know, so like I was just sending out resumes, not really looking too much into exactly what I wanted to do. And luckily I ended up actually at Raytheon, which is a defense company, which is a military defense company, working in the outside, they call it the indirect sector, which is, you know, not necessarily dealing with the defense aspect of things, but dealing with the sourcing of like, you know, different vendors, and, you know, whether it's like, you know, their food vendors or different entertainment vendors or different like, you know, hotel providers or health benefit providers.
Right.
And so it gave me some good exposure into the sourcing environment. And, you know, while I didn't really have a direct look into, you know, kind of their bread and butter, which, you know, was kind of cool, but
right.
It just gave you a lot of insight, or just a lot of opportunity, just with having all the different resources around you and just seeing how really that large scale of a company is really run.
Right. Seeing that operation kind of in force must have been like an exciting thing.
Oh yeah. Like it was kind of funny just kind of going in, you know, you have your different security level badges and everything like that. Of course, I'm at the lowest level possible, but a
little tiger paw like put on top of the badge. You're like, oh, maybe this will help.
Yeah, conversation starter.
I've seen Trevor Lawrence and I got giddy. What have you done?
Don't act like you wouldn't.
I mean, he's a beautiful man. Like, it would be the same as seeing Hanson twin, like the triplets walking around or whatever. Yeah. Just gorgeous, I'm assuming.
Imagine 3 Trevor Lawrences.
We did. They were called Hanson. They were bangers back in the 90s.
Putting out bangers.
Putting them out. So, yeah, it kind of seeing that operation and like, was it kind of, did it align? Like, so you've got real world experience. You got the books.
It was a very much like a top level, like a, C-level kind of environment, which I thought was great. I had a good exposure into, kind of these different sourcing meetings and these larger boardroom type of meetings, I guess you would want to call it. And it was really just kind of a cool insight into seeing the way that all things are done at a top level. And then the only thing that didn't really keep me around was, I guess you could call it, the pursuit of money. I had a good opportunity for something that was, it was kind of like a contract to hire role that I was in, and it wasn't really like straight full time. So I didn't get like benefits. I was still kind of like, strict to my 40 hours a week and everything like that.
Right. So, and then, so you moved on to a 3PL from there.
Yeah.
And then what was 3PL life like?
3PL life is similar to this, just on some of the day-to-day stuff, on just kind of some of the, the load planning aspect of things. But, on a kind of a more basic level, like is on a more transactional level, I guess I could say, it's a lot more focused on, here, I got a bunch of quotes, give me your best rate. And if you're the best rate, then I'll go ahead and give it to you.
Right.
I know that, from a sales standpoint, I worked in a sales office where I was really the only operations person, where, you sell it as an all-in approach. And obviously the entire goal is to get, all of the business and all of the shipping for any given company. But, what really ended up happening was it would be kind of more transactional like that, where it was just kind of, spot quoting on different things like that.
Right.
But so it was a good introduction into doing what we do here. I love, especially as somebody with some of the people that have no experience going into an industry like this. It was good to kind of have that background, considering how more in depth we kind of do with the things we do here at Aborn.
So given, I guess, now at Aborn and stuff, talk to me a little bit about kind of what you're doing here, even though we sort of talked about a little bit, but it's more of like, I kind of want to hear like how much did education help you out? And then sort of like, once you got into the real world, what were the differences from what you've been educated on, and then how you kind of got into this space?
Big thing that I think coming into here that I really was like beneficial was the ability to delegate or really prioritize. It's a very, it's just, there's a lot of different things going on. There's a lot of moving pieces at a lot of different times, and there's a lot of different changes and unexpected things that could happen on just the most routine of days.
Right.
So learning how to kind of prioritize and how to delegate and everything like that really kind of helped coming in here. And then once I came into this environment, it was kind of good to just be able to kind of, I guess, like hone on more skills, on more, practical skills, on more sustainable skills, in order to make improvements, and in order to kind of, bring better offerings and have yourself on a better understanding at a higher level of what we're doing.
And if I'm like kind of pulling back from when you talked about the whole lean and making more efficient, this is a great opportunity for you to kind of be able to do that. Whereas in some other places you kind of have been doing that sort of just straightforward, make the transaction go. Like the efficiencies aren't like something here you can see it build operation wise. There it's sort of just for you as an individual, right? Am I wrong?
Are you saying with the 3PL versus?
Yeah, just I guess more of what we're doing here in terms of.
Oh yeah. For sure. I mean, I think a lot of what we do is based around the idea of constantly improving.
Right.
Obviously, automation's a big thing for us. So we just try to make everything as least touch as possible. With obviously integrating with technology and the different platforms that we have, and then when it comes to the actual day-to-day operations, there are just things, whether it be from different vendors or just from specific locations, like even down to the size of somebody's parking lot. This place is known for not being able to fit larger trucks. They have to accommodate certain size trucks. Even different little things like that, as you have more experience with it and knowing how to, like, on the front end, rather than having it be, okay, we ran into this experience or ran into this problem, how are we going to get around it the next time?
Right.
Starting to come up with maybe some more ideas of, okay, how do we avoid this situation from the start?
Right.
And keep it on a consistent basis and be able to kind of work around those situations and, like going back to the low touch.
Yeah. I guess transitioning to something a little bit different. We'll start to wrap up because I
Mhm.
know you have things to do, so it's hard for you to take this time. What's your take on kind of the technology? I mean, as someone who I'm going to assume you're a little bit more of an early adopter, you kind of
Mhm.
grew up a little bit with more technology than kind of maybe an older kind of generation. What's your feel on the technology in the marketplace right now, or at least in the industry? Do you think it's something that's beneficial? Do you think the
Mhm.
users just have no idea about the damn stuff, or like,
I
is there a lot of
think there's a bit of a culmination of that. You know, you got, like you said, you got the environment that's not really used to technology that kind of steers away from it. Obviously, the benefits are there; they're all over the place, and they're proven in different areas. But there's also different challenges that are presented that are just completely different across just even different work cultures. You got like just the way that they operate, the way the shipping operates, the different platforms, the way they integrate together. Some of the different offerings that they have, and all in all, everything's made with the idea of making these improvements and making things smoother and making things more beneficial for for everybody around, whether it be from truckers to shippers to receivers to the whether it's a paying party, whether it's from the billing perspective,
right?
and all of that. And so all things have their offerings, but there's just so much change and so many little intricacies and it's such a defragmented market where everything is just so, there's just, like, what does it talk? It was like 90% of carriers are 6 trucks or less, or
Right,
asset-based
right.
carriers are 6 trucks or less. So it's kind of going into all those, like it's just a lot of obstacles to overcome.
Do you find that you have to practice a lot of patience when you're kind of dealing with some of these carriers and things like that, or kind of how's it? Or like, are you kind of
Mhm.
viewed as an expert when it comes to technology?
Well, I think there's a question of understanding what the technology really has to offer versus where we want to go with it
Right.
versus where we have it right now. Because obviously, in a dream world, things just get picked up, driven, dropped off. That's it.
Right.
Never any quarrels, but everybody has their different system. Everybody has their different things that are going on. It's challenging. I mean,
Right.
for sure. But I mean, being able to kind of, like I was saying, with the delegating and, just kind of be able to prioritize, you work with that the best you can. And, you just try to do it, especially with the customer, more of a customer facing role where you're different with multiple different stakeholders at all these different levels.
Right.
You gotta have some patience. You gotta have, a bit of that customer service smile on your face. And, but at the end of the day, everybody needs to get this work done. So what's the point of having a bad attitude while you're doing it?
Right. The stuff's got to get there. So roll up your sleeves, quit talking. Let's finish this, and then let's also pay attention to how do we not make this a miserable experience the next time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's the biggest thing from it is just learning from the last experience. Sometimes, you run into the situations where maybe a carrier or something, they know a strict requirement, but maybe something slips through the cracks. It's human error. It's something that we all have. It's something that,
Right.
we all do. But at the same time, it's kind of like, all right, well, we do this, 5 times a week. We should be kind of past this point. But, it's just the world we live in. That's why we hope the automation will try to fix some of those errors.
All right, let's leave on an optimistic note. What do you like about being in the supply chain? Like, what's the thing? If someone's kind of talking to you or someone's interested, what's the why you kind of like it other than being paid money?
No, I mean, well, it's just, I guess the biggest, I guess could say thing that kind of keeps me around to it is just that there's always something. It's very active. It's not like you're sitting around finding work to do or having to find different things
Right.
to either find just sort of do for work or trying to like make like other things around the office or anything like that. There's always going to be something there. There's always going to be, you always kind of just never really, I don't want to call it a dull moment, but
there's always work. You never feel like there's nothing for you to do. But speaking of which, now that you're whacking around my mic, like a whack-a-mole, I'm sure there's something for you to do right now. So we'll wrap up, man. Thanks so much, Colin, for joining me.
yeah, and thanks for having me.
How can people get in touch with you if they want to talk to you or something like that? Typically, everyone's kind of saying LinkedIn. Is that kind of
LinkedIn's pretty much. I mean, that's really the only social media I have.
Yeah.
So
It's so funny. Like most people kind of are going away from social media. Like unless it's that personal stuff. Like, hey, like you're not hitting on my Instagram. Don't worry about that. But
yeah, I mean, I don't really imagine people are going to ask me for like dynamic pricing questions on my Instagram.
Oh, that'd be
DM,
hilarious. I'm just sliding in there talking about it on the timeline. All right, cool.
What's your state to state matrices?
Oh, who is this? You're like, so yeah, I'll include a link to your LinkedIn and on the show notes so people can kind of get in touch. But otherwise, man, again, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time. I know I kind of pushed you off a couple times. So
It's all right.
glad to be able to do this.
Go Knowles.
Go Tigers.
Are you an SEU 30? You want to come on the show? We're always looking for supply chain professionals under the age of 30 that would like to talk about their journey in the supply chain. Leave a comment if you or even someone you know should be on the show. In the meantime, thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Kyle McNaught. Peace.